I'm super happy and privileged to welcome to my podcast Her Excellency Jane Marriott, OBE.
Filled in the form for the civil service fast stream. Next thing I know, I'm in the cabinet office in London. 3 years later, I'm getting on a plane to Iraq.
Do you think women in leadership positions, because they have so much responsibility, they have clarity of vision, do they intimidate men in personal settings?
I've been told that, but I think I'm like the least intimidating person ever. But I'm also a big believer in dialing your authentic self up and down. Worry about whether people respect you. Don't worry about whether they will like you or not. One of the things I love about being a diplomat is it's kind of your job to go and find the things that you've got in common with other people and with other cultures.
I've spoken to so many diplomats and people in the diplomatic circles. Very few would say that they wanted to come to Pakistan. Pakistan is usually something that they discover, they land here, they have misconceptions, they have preconceived notions, and they slowly sort of explore and stand corrected.
I definitely came in with some preconceived notions, and I think I would say all of those have been ticked. You know, is there amazing history here? Are there wonderful people here? Is there brilliant hospitality?
Hello and welcome to our brand new season of Candid with Sidra Iqbal. Some conversations help us understand the world, whereas other conversations allow us to understand each other better. Our guest today embodies both. I'm super happy and privileged to welcome to my podcast Her Excellency Jane Marriott, OBE, the British High Commissioner to Pakistan, a diplomat known for her clarity, her candor, and her deep respect for the places and people she serves. In today's conversation, we are just not going to explore the evolving relationship between UK and Pakistan, but also a deeply personal journey of a woman leader who served across continents, cultures, and complex moments in history. So let's get started. Your Excellency, thank you for making time for us today.
Sidra, thank you so much for having me on. And please call me Jane.
That's very gracious of you. So please tell me, Jane, how did foreign service and diplomacy happen for you?
Entirely by accident.
Really?
And sometimes I feel a bit guilty saying that because there are lots of people who want to be a diplomat from a very early age. But I wanted to be an astronaut, and then I wanted to be an archaeologist. And then, because I'd been watching Indiana Jones when I was growing up, so archaeologist, obviously. And then when I was 13, I was watching the BBC journalist Kate Adie reporting overseas next door in China. And she was just amazing. And I looked at her and I thought, I didn't know women could be war reporters. So then pretty much throughout my teens, I wanted to be a war reporter. And actually, I worked on the Times, the Observer in some of their summer schemes for a while. And then I didn't get one of their internships. And my mum said, fill in the form for the civil service. She said, it's a nice steady job working at the local benefits office, probably around the corner from where I grew up in Doncaster. So I filled in the form for the civil service fast stream. Next thing I know, I'm in the cabinet office in London. 3 years later, I'm getting on a plane to Iraq and kind of fulfilling my war correspondent sort of vibes, but as a diplomat, and given my parents absolute heart failure.
So it looks like you're very close to your mom because, of course, you had, she had an influence in making your career choices and getting you to fill that form. How would you look back at that?
Well, I had a very, very great childhood growing up. I was loved by two parents completely unconditionally. And I don't think I knew as I grew up how valuable that was. Mm-hmm. So whether I succeeded or whether I failed, there would be somebody there to give me a hug and go, it's okay, I love you.
And that's so important.
And it kind of took me until I was in my 20s, and it was actually a boyfriend who pointed it out to me, and he went, your family's not like normal families, right? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, whether you're doing great or whether you're doing terribly, your parents love you just the same. And I think I hadn't sort of realised how precious that was and appreciated it that much until that moment. But my dad's mantra is, am I safe? Mm-hmm. So my dad would like me to be married with 2 kids as a librarian. My mum is, am I happy? And she knows that doing things like this, being a diplomat, makes me happy. So I scare my dad and my mum knows I'm happy.
I think with your posting in Iraq and some of the very complicated secondments, I'm sure your dad must be edgy and anxious all the time.
I think now he's in denial. Now he's just kind of not really listening. But there was a brilliant moment back in 2003. So I'm just sort of starting out as a baby diplomat. And I'd actually got a job with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. And my dad was a bit upset about this. He's like, oh, Vienna, it's so far away from the UK. What am I going to do? And then he sort of came round to the idea and was like, well, I suppose I could practice my German. It'll be okay. And I rang him up one day, and I normally have the deeper conversations with my mum. And he picked up the phone. And I was like, oh, Dad, hi, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Is Mum there? And he very uncharacteristically went, you can tell me. Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm like, okay, Dad. So the good news is I'm not going to Vienna anymore. He's like, fantastic. Oh, I'm so relieved. You've no idea how relieved I am. And then he just pauses and then he goes, where are you going? And I went,
the moment of truth.
Actually, Dad, in 10 days' time, I'm getting on an aeroplane to Iraq. And this was August, September 2003, so just after the initial conflict. And my dad just dropped the phone and I heard him yell, Pat, come and talk to your daughter.
It's so intense.
And I don't think he's been the same ever since.
Ouch. And how long did you spend in Iraq?
So I spent about 3 years bouncing between Iraq and Afghanistan at that point.
So that's the parents' reaction, Jane. What about you when you found out that you're going to Iraq? And, this is the process that everyone's very curious about.
Yeah.
Do diplomats have any say at all in the destination choice? Do you actively choose it, or is it like an assignment that you can't say no to?
So it varies. It's varied a lot over time. So kind of back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even early 90s, there was an envelope and your boss handed you an envelope and you opened the envelope and you discovered whether you were going to the Bahamas, to Pakistan, to Moscow, and that's how you knew where you were going. And then you had to tell your family that if you had one. And then in the last years while I've been there, so the last 20 years or so, it's been more of an open competition. So a list of jobs comes out, you apply to them, and then if you're successful, that's where you go. And if you're not successful, you have to try and get another job.
So interesting point here. Did you choose Pakistan, or Pakistan was, again, a happy accident?
Do you know what? It was a mutual choosing. So I first came to Iraq in 2008. And then I was back again in 2018. And there's just something about Pakistan that had always quite irresistibly drawn me here. And I don't believe in fate, but I kind of always knew I would end up here.
Wow. Okay.
And I always wanted to be High Commissioner here. And I was finishing up in Kenya and I'd assumed that I was going back to the UK. And in my head, I'm like, right, I'll finish in Kenya. I'll go back to the UK for 3 years and then I'll be able to go to Pakistan. So I'd already kind of got Pakistan in my game plan. And the office said, why are you coming back to London first? And I said, oh, well, I just thought I'd come back. And they're like, no. Why don't you just go to Pakistan now? Fill in this form. So I sort of filled in this form, did an interview, and then 6 months later was on the plane to Pakistan.
It's fascinating. I mean, I've spoken to so many diplomats and people in the diplomatic circles. Very few would say that they wanted to come to Pakistan. Pakistan is usually something that they discover, they land here, they have misconceptions, they have preconceived notions, and they slowly sort of explore and stand corrected. What about those misconceptions about Pakistan? What was the people around you's reaction? Did you come in with any preconceived notions?
So I definitely came in with some preconceived notions, and I think I would say all of those have been ticked. Is there amazing history here? Are there wonderful people here? Is there brilliant hospitality? Sometimes too much hospitality. My trousers are definitely tighter than they were when I started my posting. But for many of my friends and many of the reactions of my friends, there's still this notion, particularly in the West, of Pakistan and terrorism being inextricably linked. And, there are definitely some problems, particularly in sort of certain areas towards the border with Afghanistan. But to be honest, that wasn't something that I particularly thought about, but it was the first thing that many of my friends thought about. And in fact, my now 84-year-old mum came out to visit me last year. She's not particularly adventurous, but she wanted to come and see me in Pakistan. And her friends were sort of practically saying, have you written your will? It's been nice knowing you. And my mum's like, it's not that dangerous. Jane wouldn't be out there if it's that dangerous. And my dad's like, no, she's always where the danger is. That's our daughter. That's who you've raised, Pat. And then my mum came out and she's just like, this is amazing. So we only were in Islamabad, Nathia Gali, and then over in Lahore. And she just went back, and now at 84, she's probably your oldest ambassador, telling the world about how amazing Pakistan is and how everybody should visit.
We wouldn't want people to wait to be in their 80s to discover Pakistan.
No, definitely
What was
not.
the one thing that surprised you about the country?
The hospitality, I was very aware of how amazing the hospitality was going to be. I think I hadn't quite realised that sometimes it's slightly taken to extremes, that you can offend if you don't take hospitality. So I'm celiac, so I can't eat anything with gluten in. And quite a lot of the snacks that are served at venues are gluten related, so cake or samosas, amazing looking stuff. I just can't eat any of them,
Even
or I'll be ill. Exactly. So, but I learned very quickly that I have to take something and pretend to eat it, otherwise I will cause offence. So now there's a little bit of theatre that goes on.
But that's a good problem.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, but that's like a good problem to have.
Oh, yeah,
too much
absolutely.
food, too much hospitality,
food,
too much warmth. But I think that's also a very British thing. What would you say about British hospitality? What can people expect? Because I know of a lot of people who haven't been to UK, and UK always features as one of their dream destinations, especially London. They imagine themselves being around the London Eye, the Big Ben. What would your advice be to them?
Please come and have a great time. And apologies that filling the visa in is so complicated, but we're moving to e-visas, which will at least make it a lot easier. But the UK is, it's physically quite a small country, certainly compared to Pakistan, but it's got such huge variety in it. So, absolutely go to London, go and have a photo in the red telephone boxes, go in London Eye, go to Hampton Court Palace. But, get out and go and see Stonehenge or York or Edinburgh Castle, or go over to Wales, try some windsurfing, although do take a wetsuit. There's just so much that you can do in the UK.
And I think other than the touristy things, it's also the education in UK that attracts a lot of people. Of course, the Shevening program and others help a lot of scholars, brilliant students from Pakistan to be able to explore those horizons. And you, of course, have a very strong alumni network.
Yes.
Whenever you interact with them, what stands out about them?
I think, yes, there is a real, and I'm delighted to see the affection for the quality of British education. I think it is really, really good quality. So we have about 45,000 Pakistani students in the UK at any given moment, about 12,000 more who are studying here for British degrees. And that's one of the new things that's evolved in the last 3 years, this transnational education, whereby you can study for a British degree from your home country. Because British education is not cheap. And that's because it is high quality, but sometimes that makes it unaffordable for people.
Yes.
So the transnational education is a good way of bridging that gap. But we've got about 3,500 Chevening and Commonwealth alumni now. So we've now got too many to be able to fit in one room. So we can't do reunions in the way that I would love to. But
maybe you can now have chapters. You can have reunions in every city.
Well, we're starting to go that way a bit. And actually the team's done a really, really good job at climate alumni. So climate change is one of my big passions. I don't think we talk about it enough. We're living it, but I think it's quite hard as human beings. You kind of focus at the things in front of you. And if you're faced with big existential topics, like that's too big for one person to deal with, right? But actually we need to focus on climate change more. So we've done quite a real focus this year with our climate Chevening alumni to focus on climate journalism, how to tell good stories about climate. And I think we're starting to see that in some of the media here as well now, focusing a little bit more. And of course, Pakistan is suffering from climate change. It has not created any of the problem at all. Its emissions are very, very low and always have been. But we've seen, you go up to the north, you just talk to a farmer. He'll talk to you for a good hour or two about why the snow is in a different place to where it used to be on the mountain, about how his apricots are not reliable, about how a sudden frost is destroying the cherry blossom.
And how the bees have disappeared. A lot of people have been talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day in Hunza, and still I think to a great extent, you have not one but 4 blossoms. You have the apricots and the apples and the cherries. And now suddenly you see the weather patterns moving. There are lots and lots of small villages that are literally getting erased. There are generations that have spent time trying to cultivate a piece of land, and now that's going away. And I think the distress it causes.
Yes.
I recently saw this one documentary that talked about a particular village where there's only one child left.
Oh my goodness.
And she's living amongst adults and she feels responsible. She's brilliant at studies, but there are no other children in the school. I mean, just stories like that move you.
Yeah,
Speaking about childhood, what was your childhood like, especially when it came to growing up in Britain? And when you visit now, do you find it to be the same country, or the social fabric has evolved? It's very different. Something about
so
that.
I think it's changed a lot. So I grew up in a town called Doncaster, a big industrial town. It's now officially a city. We're very proud of that. But it's kind of very white, working class town. So both my grandfathers were coal miners. And when I was growing up, I was a teenager before I physically met the first person who wasn't white. And it was a Kuwaiti boy who'd been evacuated from the 1991 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And for some reason, this poor kid had ended up in Doncaster, of all places. And that was the first time we were all like, oh, right, okay, it's not just on TV then. There are people who aren't white. So it was just a very... There's nothing other than curiosity there. It was just we hadn't seen any kids who weren't the same colour as us before. And then now I think one of the great things about Britain is it is much, much more multicultural than it was before. So someone was asking me earlier today, what are your favourite things? When you think about Britain, what's quintessentially British? And I said, my sort of knee-jerk reaction was red telephone boxes and black umbrellas.
What about chicken tikka masala?
A lot. And then the thing is kind of now Pakistan and the UK are so multicultural. The UK is so multicultural.
Yes.
And then we've got real strength from all the different cultures that have come. And to be honest, that's kind of been the pattern of the UK for hundreds, thousands of years. Whether it was kind of, the Danes coming over, or the Roman invasion and the building of Hadrian's Wall in 55 AD or BC. I should know the answer to that one. But, Britain has always been a multicultural melting pot. And I think ultimately that is one of its strengths, to recognise that.
And so many influences from all around the world. And while I was listening to you, I think it's your deep understanding of people and cultures that gives you that edge. I've had the pleasure of seeing you interact with young people in Pakistan, and you certainly leave an impression on women professionals, both upcoming leaders and legacy leaders. Jane, I read somewhere that for every decision a woman leader needs to make, she's actually making two. The first one is the decision, the question before her. And the second is, what are people going to think about her decision? What's going to be the reaction? Yeah. Have you ever felt that heat, or at any point in your career, did you feel pressured that, okay, I know the answer, I know what I want to do, but I'm afraid of how people will take it or react to it?
So one of the earliest pieces of advice I got in my 20s was from when we were doing this sort of residential course, and most of us were kind of in our early 20s, and there were a couple of women who were like really old. They were about 35 or something, which of course now I would consider super young. And one of them said, for feedback on me, she said, worry about whether people respect you. Don't worry about whether they will like you or not. That's not what we're looking for in a leader. A good leader shouldn't go around trying to be liked. They should look about being respected. And that's really, really powerful and has stayed with me. But I think my leadership style has also evolved. So I spent, being from Yorkshire, I'm kind of fairly straight talking, spade is a spade. I'll tell you what I think if you ask me. To be honest, in some ways, I'm not great as a diplomat in that sense. And then I spent in Iraq and Afghanistan sort of 3+ years working constantly with the military, who were also kind of very straight talking and have a very directional style of leadership. So I came back to the Foreign Office, had a few years working in there, and then I had a sort of big exam, a big assessment centre to get to the next sort of senior management level. And I failed it. And I failed it because I only knew how to do directional leadership. This is the decision. I've looked at all that is in front of me, and this is what we're going to do. And I'm very good at doing that.
So would you call that...
And you really need that, you really need that style in a crisis, that kind of directional decision-making. But actually failing this assessment centre, I had to go away and explore and realise there's all of these other just as valid leadership styles around building consensus, different ways of kind of bringing people together. And I have to say, I think failing that is probably one of the best things that happened to me, because it gave me a real course correction about what was possible. So now, to go back to your original question, in some ways it's not me making a decision and wondering what people will think about it. I've already brought people with me.
But drawing from that response only, in your vantage point, when we talk about directional leadership, do you think some quarters actually perceive it to be very rigid? Because you said there are so many other options out there, building a consensus. When you have a clarity of direction and somebody who has your clarity and your candor, is it seen and perceived to be rigid and inflexible?
I think you need different styles for different things. So in sort of, setting a vision for where I would like UK relations to go with Pakistan, I will seek different people's views, but ultimately I will set that vision in coordination with our ministers in London. But for other things, delegation, check back with me if there's a problem. So I think, and particularly the more senior you get, you just can't make all the decisions. And it disempowers people if you do. So I'd say, and you never stop learning and development. The day you stop learning and developing is the day you become a really bad leader, I think. Because I think you should always listen to other views. You can ignore them, but I think you should always listen to them.
And how do these learning and experiences mirror in your personal life? Because I think one of the universal things and themes I notice is no matter how accomplished a woman is, just like you mentioned, your dad would want you to be safe, a librarian, married and 2 kids.
Yes.
Is that the universal dream we are all peddled as women?
Yeah, I think we are all sort of peddled that as a sign of success. But actually at the age of 13, I was playing with my Cindy dolls. Largely I was playing with my Star Wars toys, but then by the time I was 13, my best friend Miriam and I were playing with our Cindy dolls, and her Cindy doll got married every time we played together. And I just remember thinking, my goodness, this is so boring. I don't want my Cindy doll to get married. I don't want to get married. And then by the time I was 18, I was like, actually, some people really love children, and it's perfect for some women. Actually, I'm not that interested in children. So at the age of 18, I was like, nope, I'm not having children. With the rigid, absolute view you can have when you're a teenager, and to be honest, you don't really know the world. And then throughout my 20s, I was kind of like, okay, maybe for the right man, I'd get married. If he wanted kids and was prepared to take on half the workload, maybe kids could be on the cards. But then actually didn't meet that guy, and I'm very happy as a single girl about town.
Do you think women in leadership positions, because they have so much responsibility, they have clarity of vision, do they intimidate men in personal settings?
I've been told that, but I think I'm like the least intimidating person ever. But that is feedback I've had. Yeah.
And did you ever try to change things around? Were you at any point in life thinking that, okay, maybe I need to do something about that? Because a lot of women feel that pressure.
Definitely had that conversation with myself and with a few close male and female friends. And kind of ultimately, I'm a big believer in being your authentic self, but I'm also a big believer in dialing your authentic self up and down and qualities of that. So when you're in your workplace, you need to be you, but you don't necessarily need to be 100% you, because not every colleague needs to know that thing that you're going through. And it's a bit the same in your personal life. So I've got friends who I feel I can kind of be completely and utterly silly with, and other friends for whom I'm largely a sounding board for them about what's going on in their careers or their love lives or their housing dramas or something like that. So I feel you kind of, you can be your authentic self, but just dial it up, dial it down according to the circumstances.
I love that. I think it is such an aha moment, because you can be your authentic self, but you probably don't need to be very transparent about things. That's the message we can. And I like the factor that you've given the analogy of a dial up, dial down. Did that come through diplomacy, your life in the public eye, and of course in the High Commission?
I think so, and just kind of pausing and reflecting on it. So, sometimes it's that, is that best done as an inner voice thing, or can I articulate that?
Okay.
And certainly the more senior you get, the more you're thinking about impacts on other people. So not will they like me or not, but if I say this, how will that make them feel? So, if there's a kind of a minor error, a less experienced me, or sort of me 10 years ago, might have gone, oh, that doesn't work. I didn't like that. And now I've kind of learned that the way you get the best out of people is to go, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for doing that. Next time, could we have a look at doing it this way instead? And then you'll just get a much better response out of people. So, my authentic self is to go, oh, I'm so cross. And then my dialed down authentic self is to go, how am I going to make this situation better for this person so that they feel good about themselves and they will be able to do a better job?
I think I had read a meme about this very recently.
Oh, really?
Where okay, born to say, please go away. I don't really think much about your opinion, but you're forced to say, well, gladly, it makes all kinds of opinions are there in the world. So you have this little, this tug of war happening inside you. But since you so candidly shared your worldview as an 18-year-old, now as more life has happened and more experiences and wisdom have come your way, what's the one advice you would go back and give your 18-year-old self?
Oh, I actually quite like my 18-year-old self. I think I did have a confident, mostly women kind of in their 40s will say to their younger self, be more confident. Actually, I think I was quite confident. I was just very quietly confident. So it was interesting sort of by the time I was in my 30s and I was ambassador to Yemen when I was about 35, 36. And a few of my friends were like, wow, when we met you at university, we just didn't see that in you. And my reaction was, wow, you really didn't look very hard or know me very well, did you? Because to me, that's always kind of where I had just thought I would go. But I just didn't need to make a big thing about it. I didn't need to be overly confident. I could just be sort of quietly confident, getting on with things.
I think that's humility speaking, because you're being very humble about it. But I've always been in awe of women who've carried so much responsibility with so much grace. Like Benazir Bhutto was our Prime Minister at 34. You were the High Commissioner to Yemen at 35. And at that age, and especially the decade of 30s, even when you have a lot of experience and exposure, there's always that voice of self-doubt. What's your process of getting over that or calming your nerves and not feeling conscious about, okay, I know what I'm doing, and just go with it?
I think, dare I say this, probably the need to prove people wrong.
So yes, give them a good fight.
So kind of, so many, when I was applying to be ambassador to Yemen, the guy who was in the role at the time basically said to me, oh, you're not going to get this. There's only ever been one female ambassador and you're far too young. And there's lots of, much better competition. You're not going to get this. And to be honest, I hadn't really wanted to be ambassador Yemen to that point. I was fairly agnostic if I got it or not. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, right, I will show you. I'm going to be ambassador Yemen. I'm going to be the best ambassador to Yemen that you've ever had. And others can judge the latter thing, but I did get to be ambassador Yemen. So in some ways, my sort of overcoming self-doubt is that other people ventriloquize that doubt to you, and then I kind of want to prove them wrong.
So the challenge is your go-to motivation bit,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Say no, and then you see me go.
Yeah.
Watch me.
Absolutely.
With that competitive streak, did you ever indulge in sports growing up, or is there one?
You know what? In my school, there were kind of like the sporty kids and the nerdy kids. My best friend was like chief of the sporty kids, Lisa. She was amazing, super, super fit. And I was just one of the nerdy kids. I played the cello. I hung out in the music room. I tried to avoid going to the changing rooms or running around the athletics pitch because it was really cold. So it's only later in life that actually I've started to discover exercise. And I'm now addicted to doing at least one Margla hike a week out of Islamabad.
Wow. That's impressive.
And I love the fact that it's a 10-minute drive, and then you've got a 2-hour hike straight up to the top of the Marglas. The friend I go with claims his knee is bad, which is why we can't walk down. I think he's being slightly lazy, but I haven't called him on it yet.
There's so many trails. There's Trail 3, and I think Trail 5 is the more difficult one.
Yep, those two are my favourite, particularly Trail 3, because it's hard, and I like the challenge. And then Trail 4 is I can't be bothered to work too hard, but I do need to go on a hike. So If you do left at the turning, it's sort of a little sort of climb up, but then you get to kind of do a nice descent down.
I think that's also, some of the common experiences a lot of diplomats have. I've heard this. I've heard about this. People who have spent time in Islamabad, they usually connect over whether you've done the trail or not.
Yes.
But the earlier experience where you said that, yes, there are two groups when you're growing up, especially in my high school as well. There were the sporty girls and the nerdy girls. Yours truly was also a nerdy girl.
Yes.
Because I was wearing glasses way too early.
Yeah.
By grade 5, I had reading specs. And I always assumed that if I'd be active in sports, the ball would come into my glasses.
Yeah.
And that fear took forever to go away.
Yeah.
I think not till the contact lenses arrived.
So what sport do you do now?
Nothing, just the gym. I've become a gym buddy. Just like you, I discovered that I need to get some movement in, some exercise in, and God bless my personal trainer for making sure that there's some strength training that comes
some
to
good
it.
weights. Excellent.
What about you? When you're traveling extensively, you have to acclimatize to a new continent, a new country, a new culture. Are there some constants as, okay, this is what I do for a disciplined life? Just like you mentioned. Yeah. What if your next posting is a place where you can't hike? What would you do then?
Ooh, I might not go.
It's that important.
Yeah, well, I think the fitness is, and the fitness being fun.
Yes.
And particularly kind of once you hit your late 30s, early 40s, particularly for women, that strength training, that muscle, and also the bone density is really, really important. So I've done calcium tablet and strength training for quite a long time now, and it's definitely helped. But one of the things I love about London is that you can walk everywhere. So you can get the tube, you can get public transport, but kind of in that central London area, you can pretty much walk everywhere. So I have a Fitbit, and when I'm in London, I walk probably 20,000 steps a day without even really trying. And I have a basic rule. When it comes up on the app and it's, 30 minutes by public transport or 45 minutes walking, I'm like, okay, within the 15-minute window, I have to walk. So I will force myself to walk.
Before you got in here, I was trying to draw parallels between London and Karachi.
Yeah.
But that's something you guys definitely have. It's a walkable city. You can walk everywhere. In Karachi, unfortunately, the only people who walk are the ones who don't have any means of transportation.
Yes.
And that's sad. But other than that, both are mega cities. Both are diverse, cosmopolitan, with some similar challenges as well when it comes to street crime and a dense population and the government system struggling to sort of make sure that everyone's served, the transportation is running smoothly, there's water, there's electricity. Well, ours is a little more severe than yours, but of course, heating versus eating was something which was very, very ripe in London as well. How do the two cities compare? And what do you think is the future of megacities in the world?
So I'm actually not so my dad struggles with the concept of London because it's huge, but actually it is only 10, 11 million people. So it's actually tiny compared to Karachi. I'm not sure who's saying what numbers for the size of Karachi at the moment. I know that's quite political, but London's at least 2, if not 3 times smaller than Karachi. But I love the fact that London is walkable. I think probably I love the fact that London is walkable. Our public transport is really, really good. But the thing that my dad struggled to get his head around was just how big it is. So I said to him, don't think about it as London as one place. Think about it as neighbourhoods. So whether you're talking sort of Kensington and Chelsea is the posh to-go place, or kind of the slightly more cool sort of King's Cross, Hoxton area, or where I live in Southwark, which is which was seen as the den of iniquity back in sort of the 1500s and 1600s, when there were no real bridges across London. You had to get a rowboat from the city of London up to across the river to Southwark, which is where all the exciting things happened, like bear fighting and cockfighting and things like that. So that was the entertainment quarter of London. So kind of thinking about it as its neighbourhoods makes it much easier to get a handle on it. And each neighbourhood kind of evolves its own personality, a bit like here.
And when you talk about the diversity and the various ethnicities and nationalities now coming together, you spoke about the multiculturalism. Do you see that as a strength, especially when it comes to mega cities? Because with that comes complexities. It comes with flavors and textures, and sometimes it could really have people colliding, not being able to see eye to eye. How does one come over and get over those challenges?
I think that's one of the big debates that the UK is having right now. Sort of what is British? What does it mean to be British? But again, history is fascinating. So nobody kind of goes, ooh, Jane Marriott, that's a French name. Are you one of those French people who invaded us in 1066? No one says that anymore because with the passage of history, we have all just assimilated with each other. But I think one of the challenges now, particularly with social media, particularly with polarization, is people are very much focused on the differences. And I think what we really need to get back to in society is focusing on the commonalities and the things that we've got in common, and then the things that we can learn from each other, whether that's through cooking or cultural practices. I remember sort of my first Christmas in a Muslim country, which was Iraq, and some of the local population had put Father Christmases in the shop windows because they were like, but, Christians, it's good for business. Come and buy your Father Christmas here. I'm like, yeah, cool, brilliant. Why not?
And also this time we saw the Eid and Ramadan lights light up London.
Absolutely.
So yes, there's a lot of common ground to celebrate. But Jane, one of the things I really admire about diplomats is how they build bridges. They get the dialogue started, they make the people-to-people connection, they humanize the whole process. But I must ask you, is it difficult being a diplomat in a world that is rife with conflict and with identity politics?
It definitely feels as though it's harder than it was. Certainly starting out in my career, there were kind of, sort of Iraq and Afghanistan in particular were conflicts. And as a diplomat, you kind of knew where your place was in trying to resolve that conflict. And there were different opinions back home, but there was kind of civilized debate about it. Yes. So even when I went to Iraq in 2003, I was opposed to the invasion. A lot of my Foreign Office colleagues were opposed to the invasion. A lot of people in the country were opposed to the invasion. But we could have that discussion, and nobody kind of thought better or worse, depending on what somebody's position on that was. And indeed, one of the things I thought was, well, I'm opposed to the invasion of Iraq, but now we've done it, I want to go and help. How can I make the world a better place? And I feel as though we've lost quite a lot of that. How do we as individuals make the world a better place, but also how do we as communities make the world a better place?
Jane, one of the things I really admire about diplomats is how they get the conversation started. They make the connections, they humanize the whole process, and they bring so much compassion to the whole equation. But I must ask you that in a world that is rife with conflict, and of course with the very polarized views, identity politics, is it hard being a diplomat and trying to build those bridges?
So I think the world definitely feels a lot more polarised than it was even 5 years ago, never mind 10 or 15 years ago. But one of the things I love about being a diplomat is it's kind of your job to go and find the things that you've got in common with other people and with other cultures. So what I'm constantly doing when I'm here in Pakistan is looking at the things that bring us together. There are lots of areas where we have different opinions on geopolitics or other areas around society and things, but actually there's so much that we've got in common, including, of course, the incredible 1.6 million diaspora from Pakistan in the UK, people of Pakistani heritage, and 100,000 Brits in Pakistan at any given moment. So I think building on those positives, building on what we've got in common is essential. But compassion, I kind of like a job where I like your job description is to be compassionate. That's quite nice.
And what leads you when the policy structure or the dialogue is actually shaping up? I mean, there's a narrative which the governments would have and the intention that the government officials and diplomats would have. And then there's, of course, other dynamics. There are non-state actors, there's media, there's social media. What really is shaping our narrative today, and how are the bilateral relationships, especially between two countries like UK and Pakistan, being taken forward?
I think one of the challenges of the world today is speed. So the communication of information, but also disinformation and misinformation, is just so absolute. And whether it's kind of, everybody's got a family WhatsApp group, whether it's your great aunt who is kind of posting something that she hasn't stopped to check if it's true or not, but it's about crime or scams or something she's heard, and you're like, Grandma, that's not true. So I think it's kind of incumbent on all of us, whether it's within our families or the way we're sense checking ourselves, to try and kind of work out what is real and what is not real. And that used to be easier. It was never completely easy because, governments have always shaped narratives, organizations have always shaped narratives, whether that's business or media. And in some ways, the whole advent of the internet was meant to be about this great democratization and everybody had a voice.
Yes.
But suddenly everybody has a voice. And whilst that's a good thing to an extent, trying to work out, well, who is actually the expert versus who is the person who is shouting the loudest. We've probably all been at that dinner party or that gathering of friends where you've got one mate who's got really, really strong opinions and you know exactly what they think. But you've got a quiet mate who is the expert, who is just sat there drinking their coffee going, I'm not even going to get involved with this guy or this woman because they're just shouting and it's not going to be a good conversation. And sometimes the internet feels like a big version of that, where the people with the strongest opinions are shouting the loudest, but the voices of the experts who are, have studied, are educated, are trained, those voices are not being heard as much. Now, the person with opinions should still be able to have those opinions. They should still be able to voice those opinions. But I feel as societies globally, we're kind of giving more emphasis to the shouty person with opinions rather than the expertise, particularly on things like climate change, for example, where we really do need expertise. I mean, the conversations we need to be having both in the UK and in Pakistan actually are about water. And in particular, there isn't enough water for the world to go around anymore. So whether you're talking about things like investing in desalinization plants or better agricultural techniques, that's what we should be talking about. So we did, so the UK is supporting just a very small project in rural Punjab. It's a very simple project that is about measuring the moisture at the content of the soil. It's a very simple device, but it connects to the internet, and the internet will basically give you a message to your phone that kind of goes, green, plants are okay, amber, ooh, might need a bit of water, feeling a bit thirsty, red, for goodness sake, give me water, I'm going to die.
Yes.
And what we saw with these trials is that overall it saved the farmer 25% of water. So the plants, the crops needed 25% less water, and they were growing 18 to 24% more. Now, that's really simple.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because Pakistan, just in the last few decades, has gone from being, very self-sufficient when it came to our water supplies to being a water scarce country now. So it's really, really scary. But what I'm also hearing are things that you're very, very passionate about. I want to know that as a senior diplomat and as a leader, do you still pay heed to what's trending and what's going around? What are people shouting, as you would say? It may not have a lot of depth in terms of expertise and real data, but are you listening to what's happening online?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you need to know what the sentiment of people is. So, even if that person is shouting very, very loudly, it's just saying, he or she has an opinion. Opinions are valid, but they're not the same thing as facts. And that person is feeling what they're feeling. So you can either just ignore them, but they're probably not going to go away, or you can harness that and have a conversation, because actually at the root of all of these things, so to be honest, some of the challenges in the UK at the moment are around immigration. They're not actually really about immigration. They're really about economics. And they're about the fact that people don't feel as well off as they did before, and they want to feel better off. They want to see a positive trajectory for their children and their children's children. And people are worried about things like artificial intelligence.
But do you think that there may be pockets of group that may have vested interest and are trying to weaponize that sentiment? That fear is very real, but to be able to harness that for political gain or for other gain is also a very real reality of the world.
Yeah, so power is an aphrodisiac. Power can corrupt. People want power for the sake of having power. Someone said to me once, Jane, you're very successful. You've had a lot of promotions. Was it the power? And I went, actually, just every time I looked at my boss and I was like, I can so do your job better than you can. The only way to change things is to get promoted, right? I'm going to get promoted, now I can change things. So, I think there are two types of people who want power. People who want power for the sake of having power, and people who want power because they see that they can change things for the good of humanity. But that does mean that you have to listen to humanity and what humanity wants.
Jane, I think that is going to be a hard relate with young people, especially because a lot of them feel that frustration. The only way to get things done is I need to get promoted and have the authority and have the power and have the say, the voice to do it. And I think we're kind of getting a glimpse of that around the world. Gen Z is being branded and labeled as the rebels. They want to shake the system up. They're not happy with a lot of things. Do you see that to be a universal problem? Do you see that as pockets? What's exactly brewing, and how do you view the potential of Gen Z?
Yeah. So I think there is definitely something about every generation coming through thinks that they are the rebels. So, the kids in the 50s who listened to rock and roll horrified their parents. So in some ways, I don't actually see, in the nicest possible way, I don't think Gen Z are actually that different to any of the generations that have gone before them in terms of there are things that they don't agree with. There are things that they want changing, and they want to take responsibility for changing them. And I think that probably is one change. So I'm a Gen Xer, and we were very much brought up within a system. So change things within the system, be on the inside, change things within the system. But I think what we're seeing with social media and Gen Z is they're going, no, I don't want to change the system. I want to take the system down in some way, shape or form. I don't agree with those institutions. Those institutions aren't delivering. And I very much see where they're coming from. My only challenge as a very sensible Gen Xer is to say, whilst I agree with you that a lot of institutions aren't working for everybody, my advice would be never tear something down until you know that the thing that is coming afterwards is better. Because there's always a danger, whether it's values, if you want to change values, or belief in the civil service. Civil service has been questioned quite a lot in a lot of countries. Are we really delivering? And we can do better. Of course, we can always do better. So I say to kind of Gen Z, absolutely, let's harness that passion, let's harness that energy, but let's do the change together and build something better together. Destroying things is very easy. Building things is what we need to focus on. How do we build better societies, better lives, better institutions together?
That's a very powerful statement, but I notice a trend that for a lot of people, they haven't thought that far.
Yeah.
All they're thinking about is, okay, I need to rally and have enough power to bring this thing down. And yes, they hope, there is idealism that what we'll build on ground zero will be better. But you're absolutely right to bring in that equation, that caution, that maybe we need to think that far. Do you think that is one of the greatest challenges before states and governments when it comes to containing this raw energy and also trying to bring improvement in the systems and institutions?
I think it is, because there are these voices, there are these passions, and the economics is harder than it is. And we briefly touched on artificial intelligence earlier. When you and I grew up, we knew that if you worked hard, you could get a good job. You may or may not meet the person of your dreams, but you could have a house, you could build a career. There's this sort of positive path and this positive social contract. You work hard, be a good member of society, and you can have these things. That maths just doesn't work anymore for Gen Z. Cost of living is more expensive. Renting something in London, buying something in London is nearly impossible if you're Gen Z, unless you've got parental money or grandparental money, and that just exacerbates inequality. So I think one of the challenges that we kind of need to overcome together is, what is that better world, that better vision to bring together and build on? And what is that new social contract with Gen Z?
I think it's a creativity challenge for the governments as well. While a lot of them would like to harness the power of technology and AI, but just like you pointed out, example being of pension funds, it's a challenge for every country, for every government, because you have smaller families now, lesser job opportunities, more people who are going to be dependent on the system. So these are very universal problems. Do you think AI and technology, because we see people on both sides of the debate.
Yes.
Some think that it's going to be the savior for everything and it will have an answer, while on the other side of the debate, people are fearful. They feel jobs and industries and perhaps even, the entire business models are going to be wiped away. How do you think it will, impact diplomacy as well?
So we're already seeing quite a lot of impact on diplomacy, actually. We had a sort of compulsory 15 days of AI course over the summer, sort of learning a little bit each day about how we can use AI to make our jobs better and our lives easier. And I think what we're seeing is that quite a lot of entry-level work So, do a first draft of a submission for a minister, write a paper on, the historical relations between the UK and Pakistan. An awful lot of those drafts can be done by AI now. So I think in some ways we are already harnessing that in the world of diplomacy. I think the challenges is, to our earlier point, is about fact checking. So AI can only draw from the information that is out there. And if the information out there is not accurate or is biased in some way, shape or form, then that will come through in what you're asking the AI to produce. And I think part of the challenge as well is that when you're starting out as a baby diplomat, your job is to write those papers, and that's how you grow and gain awareness. And I do worry a bit, and there's sort of scientific evidence behind this now, that we're making our brains more lazy. And I noticed this years and years ago. So I used to, it was Friday night, I go to the cinema with a friend, dinner, cinema, go to a bar afterwards, deconstruct the film. It was great. And then box sets started being a thing. So 45 minutes of watching Jack Bauer sort of save the world again in 24. And I realised after a couple of years, my attention span had turned into exactly 45 minutes. And if I was watching a film at the 45-minute mark, I'd be like,
fidgety.
What's going to happen next? I'm ready for my cup of tea. So that was kind of my very unscientific version of this, but I think we've seen more of that.
But they have ways to actually trick you. Like imagine when the new season of your favorite show is out, it's usually 8 parts. Every part is going to be 45 minutes, and they usually leave you at that cliffhanger that you just can't stop.
I've got a tip for that. You commit to watching the first 3 minutes of the next episode so you can find out what the cliffhanger is, what the denouement is, and then you press stop.
So does that work?
So I watch an episode, but I kind of watch 45 minutes, of which like 42 minutes is one episode and 3 minutes is the next episode.
Jane, that makes perfect scientific sense, because just yesterday I was watching this tip by Mel Robbins. She had this hack about if you're having difficulty falling asleep, have a list and check out things that you haven't completed. So what it allows the brain to do is close the loop. And you've said exactly that. So there's a cliffhanger that makes you press the next play button. Watch the next 3 minutes, close the loop, and then disconnect.
And then move on. The other thing I do actually is I bribe myself for exercise. So because it's hard to kind of get out living in the diplomatic enclave, and I kind of like exercising at night. So I've got one of those elliptical things, and I'll kind of go into one of the rooms where I've got an elliptical, and I'll play an episode of a TV series that I'm slightly addicted to. And I'm not allowed to watch that TV show other than when I'm exercising. So I basically bully myself into exercising.
I like the bribe system because it's for the good. I again heard people say that everything which is good for you is initially going to look and sound and feel uncomfortable, but you'll have this great satisfaction once you've done that. You feel great after doing your little bit of movement in. But everything that is like an impulsive, like, okay, let me go and have that last piece of cake, is going to induce a lot of guilt after. But having said that, since you mentioned Islamabad and the diplomatic enclave, the running joke is that now Islamabad has a 5th season, and that season is that of the containers. What do you think about that? And how is life in Islamabad, and especially the years and months that you've spent so far? It has had its own set of excitement and breaking news and protests. How do you feel as a diplomat about that?
Well, to be honest, as a diplomat, you like things to be interesting, which is sometimes it's a bit like sort of journalists. Actually, you feel slightly guilty when things are interesting. So to be honest, I'm kind of in the state of life now where I kind of want a bit more boredom. Particularly in the world, there's just so much going off in the world. Could the world just calm down, and could we all be a little bit bored, please? I think sitting with boredom would be good for us. But Islamabad is a city, I absolutely love it. And I know that's hard to believe as a Karachiite, because Karachi is kind of noisy and vibrant and dynamic. And so for Karachiites, Islamabad can look a little bit boring. But I love the fact that it's green, that it's quiet, that you can go hiking, that the traffic is, relatively good. You can move around quite easily. So,
quite the contrary.
So my secret crush is Islamabad, actually, as a city.
Quite the contrary. Even as a Karachiite, I must confess that every time I go to Islamabad and if I'm outdoors, it feels like a place where you have spa music playing in the background. It's that serene. You can just relax, and everything is calm and there's no chaos in the world. And therefore, it's really a contrast contrast when the container season arrives and you're watching a different kind of headlines coming out of Islamabad. It's interesting. But very recently, we've again had security threats. How does that reflect on you personally? I mean, you've been to a variety of countries that unfortunately have had that same complex security environment and atmosphere. Is this all in a day's work, or does it still affect you? How do you process it, Jane?
I think particularly for somewhere like Pakistan, it's a country that has so much potential, and it's starting to really realise that potential. So I know there is a lot of emphasis on making sure these security threats aren't materialised. And I really, really hope that is successful, because I want Pakistan to be the country that it is, that it can be, that its people want it to be. And I think sort of focusing on that, it's kind of when my friends think terrorist bombings when they talk Pakistan, and I say, no, yeah, we've had one suicide bomber in Islamabad in 11 years. We've had attacks in the UK as well. We had a suicide bomber in Manchester. These things are absolutely awful, but they do happen across the world.
A bit of a heartless analogy, but a lot of people say that preventing a terrorist attack of that nature is almost like football goalkeeping. It's not the thousands that you save, it's the one that gets by and unfortunately makes the bad headlines. But Jane, I want to go back, and probably my last final question to you would be, when you talk about a calmer, nicer, more connected, less conflict world.
Yes.
And for a lack of a better word, we call it the boring world. Do you see that happening in the next years to come, or the next decade, which is going to be unfolding?
I think it could happen, but we're going to have to work really hard at it and not take anything for granted. So I think there's a trend about sort of self-improvement, which I'm, a big fan of, self-improvement. But actually all the studies show that we as human beings are happier when we're helping other people. So actually taking a spa day for yourself, or whatever it is you choose to do to make yourself feel good, absolutely crack on and do that. But you know what really makes you feel good? Is buying your friend a spa treatment and going together.
Point taken.
If we're going to stick with the
I'll
spa
take you out
analogy.
to a spa very soon.
Okay, you're on.
But Jane, thank you so much for making time for us. And I love the worldview, the perspective that you brought to it. I think there's a lot of advice for young people, for upcoming leaders. I do want to end on understanding what your personal worldview would be. Where does Jane see herself in the next 10 years or 20 years? And also, you've been to so many exciting places around the world. Do you see yourself retiring in the UK?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough question. I'm not sure I see myself retiring at all, to be honest.
That's a brilliant answer.
Yeah, no, I kind of see myself working in some sort of shape or form for, another good 40, 50, 60, you never know with longevity nowadays, years. But I've always said there's three things I'm looking for in a job. One is, will it make a difference? Will what I'm doing make a positive difference in the world? Maybe not every day, but overall on balance, can I try and help leave the world a little bit of a better place? Some of that is, career-wise, and some of it is just about being a good friend, being a good neighbour, being a good daughter, being a good sister. So can I make a difference? Is it going to be interesting? As I say, interesting as being a big driver. I now think Confucius really understood what he was talking about when he said, may you live in interesting times. So like Confucius, please can we have boring times? And also, is it going to be fun? Because life is very long, and people like me, sort of middle class, privileged background in many, many ways, I have the option of kind of going, am I enjoying this? And, not every day, not every moment, but, am I enjoying this? Am I helping make the world and other people's lives better? That's what matters for me.
And I think we wish that for everyone, no matter where you are and what strata you belong to. May you be living in interesting times and having a lot of fun, and growing up with that belief that anything and everything is possible. So if you have a dream, if you have unfinished business and you'd like to commit your life and your energies to it, may you have the possibility of doing that. But Jane, it was an absolute delight. Thank you for your candor, for once again sharing so honestly some of the things which you have experienced, some of the things that you feel about the world. And I wish you all the very best of luck. And it's wonderful to have you in Pakistan. May you make more wonderful memories in the country, and all the very best of luck for your future secondments as well.
Thank you very much. And thank you for letting me be in this wonderful, amazing country. I love it.
And with that, this conversation comes to an end. And I think it was impact driven. It is your dose of thinking that a better tomorrow is possible. There are so many diligent change makers, diplomats, policy makers who are tirelessly working towards that. So if you have questions, if you had an aha moment, because this gave you a glimpse of their personal and their professional life, do send me that in your comments. And inshallah, until next time, take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.